Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It is exactly 15:40 p.m. We're now going to be joined by Neeresh Badal. He is
Exactly
an SAC
15:40
registered
p.m.
educator.
We're
He
now
is also an EDTP CETA registered assessor and a homeschool father of two, founder of a non-profit organization, Let's Do It Together for Education, member of Latitude Home Education, executive member of the Gauteng Association for Homeschooling, and members of both the Gauteng and KZN Joint Liaison Committee. And we're going to be talking about the schools admissions crisis. So we welcome you, Neeresh Badal. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Julie. Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to be on Salam Media.
Okay, great. Are you not switching on your video? We'd like to see you. No. Okay, my producers just told me there seems to be some technical issues there, so let's dive right in. Recent data shows that more than half of applications to some Gauteng schools contain false address information. From your experience, Neeresh, what is driving parents to take such drastic steps?
Um, this is an issue that's been making headline news. And I think it's important to begin by saying that in education, everyone has an opinion. These opinions often strongly held on topics like school admissions, access, and fairness. And people become very emotional, and understandably so, because we are speaking about children, families, and their futures. So while not everyone may agree with the comments I may make, it's important that we approach this discussion in a balanced, lawful, and a kind of honest way. And there are a very important legal point for listeners to understand and to remember is that Bella Act is now law. So at the same time, there are still draft regulations dealing with admission of learners to public schools. Those are not the same as final regulations. So we must be careful to distinguish between what is already law and what is still being proposed or discussed. I also want to remind listeners that I am speaking here in my own personal capacity. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Department of Education or any government department. My comments are based on my experiences in education. So, what is driving this issue of false admission information is not simply dishonesty, it is fear, inequality, and desperation. We all know that where a child goes to school shapes academic performance, language exposure, access to sport, future opportunities, and it even affects discipline and learner safety in some instances. So, when families believe their local schools are under resourced or unstable, they try to access schools they see as safer, or better performing. And these schools are then often regarded as preferred schools. The desire for these preferred schools do not justify fraud, but it helps explain it. And in South Africa, school choice is often really a choice about escaping poor infrastructure, overcrowding, academic support, or unsafe environments. So this issue is not only about parental misconduct, it's about unequal schooling conditions across communities.
So, what you're really saying is that this is a symptom of a deeper systemic problem within the education system. And I guess this is also, um, uh, also comes about because of our past history, our history of apartheid. And we haven't gone beyond that as yet. I think there's still going to be many more years of hard work before the playing fields have been leveled.
So, a very large part of this problem is historical. Apartheid did not only separate learners by race, it distributed land, transport access, school infrastructure, teacher support unequally. And those patterns still shape where better resourced schools are located and which families can realistically access them. Even today, many families in townships or poorer communities face the reality that their closest school may not offer the same as what other schools in wealthier suburbs offer. So when we talk about address fraud, we're not just talking about this as if it's a problem that's emerged um, recently. It sits inside a much bigger structural problem, uneven school quality links to geography, income, and historic injustices. And, I want to use an example of Lenasia, south of Johannesburg. And between the K43 highway and the railway station, there are 9 public schools that were all built by the apartheid government. And each of these schools were built to accommodate about 500 to 700 learners. Today, those 9 schools have a learner population of over 18,000 learners. That's about 2,000 learners per school, 3 times more than its intended capacity. And about 80% of those learners in these schools travel from outside the area. So initially, it was believed that parents preferred the Indian schools because there was better quality of teaching. And then it was later realized that parents also preferred the schools in Lenasia because they wanted their children to be taught in English. And many teachers from schools outside of Lenasia started applying for positions in schools in Lenasia because they were regarded as better schools. And many of them were successful in their application. The end result was that the same teachers ended up teaching the same learners at different schools. The only difference was that both teacher and learner ended up traveling to a school in Lenasia. And Lenasia is not unique to this problem, but it's an example that shows that this issue is deeply rooted in historic inequalities and uneven quality of schools across the communities. Apartheid planning created schools for separate communities and unequal numbers, and those patterns still affect access today. Over time, certain schools became pressure points, not only because of reputation, but because they offered things surrounding schools did not, like the English medium, instruction stability, or perceived better quality of education. And that's why this problem cannot be reduced to just parents simply breaking rules. It's part of a much bigger structural inequality in our education system.
So you touched on the Bella Act at the beginning of the show. We do know that schools will introduce stricter rules around admissions. What impact could these regulations have on parents who are already desperate to access better schools, taking the Bella Act into account? What sort of, how does the Act then possibly prevent this problem from escalating even higher than it is currently sitting at?
You know, parents, I want to say that parents are not using false addresses because they enjoy or they want to be breaking rules. They're doing it because they believe the school their child is zoned for is not good enough, not safe enough, or not giving their children the same opportunities as schools in better areas. So when parents see one school as a gateway to opportunity and another as a dead end, it tells us that many of these parents have lost confidence in the quality of schooling available in their own communities. And that result has made some of them make bad and unlawful choices out of panic and desperation. And it is a violation of the Bella Act, where false information is knowingly submitted. And it's section 36 of the Bella Act states it's illegal to submit false information. Bella Act states that when applying for admission to a public school, a parent or any other person who submits information they know is false or misleading, submits a document they know is forged, or submits a document and claims it's a true copy when it's not, is guilty of an offense and can be convicted or face an imprisonment or fine or both. Um, you know, the first impact is that parents need to understand that admissions are being treated more seriously in law. The amendments in Bella Act um, says that parents schools must admit learners without unfair discrimination, but it also confirms that a head of department has the final authority after a school or governing body fails to admit a learner, and a parent has a right to appeal. So the draft regulations also tell us that by requiring valid proof of residential or work address and allowing schools to verify supporting documents indicates that false or misleading information may lead to rejection or cancellation of admission. So desperate parents, the message is that the room for manipulating admissions is shrinking. But the proper appeal and placement processes remain available and are there, they do exist. These changes means that parents must be more careful and more honest. The law is tightening up. False information can lead to serious consequences, but parents still have the right to appeal if they believe a school placement decision is unfair.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. When we come back, we'll talk some more on this matter, including the option of homeschooling.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
For the first time, I can dream again.
The Africa Muslims Agency Orphan Hope Program provides the food, clothing, and basic support needed by thousands of children across the world. Every child deserves a chance at a hopeful future.
For 15,000 trans, you can transform our lives with the AMA Orphan Hope Program.
Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Use the black seed, for indeed it is a cure for every disease except death." This Ramadan, honor that guidance. Tip Black Seed supports your blood sugar during fasting, boosts immunity, sustains your energy from suhoor to iftar. Available at leading pharmacies. Tip Black Seed, your golden drop every day.
Elite Basmati, available throughout the Middle East, and now for the very first time exclusive to South Africa. Brought to you by Murchison Spice, Peter Marisburg's most famous specialty store. Elite Basmati, available in aromatic white and golden cellar, is packaged in a world-class facility in India and is filled with wholesome goodness for your well-being. Elite Basmati rice by Murchison Spice. For trade inquiries, contact Mohammed on 033 387 2121. Murchison Spice.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. We're talking with Neeresh Badal, and we're looking at the question of the school admission crisis. Why are parents falsifying addresses with the schooling system? And as you've heard, some of his responses make perfectly good sense. So welcome back to you, Neeresh. And as someone involved in the homeschooling community, are you seeing more parents considering alternatives like homeschooling because of the challenges within the public school admission system?
Yes, definitely. Home education is one of the fastest growing sectors in education. And many parents are looking at these alternatives because they feel stuck between a school they cannot access or a school that they do not trust. And for some families, homeschooling, tutor support, learning, or micro schools, online schools are not only more flexible, but in some cases also more affordable and better suited to their children's needs. And before COVID, online schools were not nearly as common as they are now. During COVID-19, and especially just after COVID-19, there was a big move towards online schooling because many families saw it as practical alternatives. But more recently, that trend is starting to change. And we're seeing now more and more parents moving towards tutor centers and micro cottage schools instead. Again, the reasons are access to public schools, online schools offering trimmed down curriculums, less direct support. Um, so homeschooling, is also not an easy escape route for every family. It requires time, structure, support, and in many cases, cost. So yes, admission pressure is pushing some families towards alternatives, but alternative education is also not equally accessible or affordable to all parents, and parents must make informed decisions when deciding to go alternative routes.
What are the legal requirements and regulations parents should understand when applying for school placement in South Africa, and also the current school admission and feeder zone system? How does it work, and why does it often become a barrier for many families?
Okay, so let's maybe start off with the feeder zones. In simple terms, feeder zones are used to manage demand and prioritize admission. Under the current draft regulations of the Bella Act, Where a feeder zone exists, preference is given first to a learner whose parents live closest within that feeder zone, then to a learner with a sibling already at that school, and then to a learner whose parents work in that feeder area. But it does not automatically bar any other learner from outside the area from applying. And that barrier arises, when there are too many applicants for far too few places. Then proximity becomes a major deciding factor. For many working class families, it means better performing schools may be visible and nearby in social terms, but legally inaccessible because of zoning, capacity limits, or transport issues. So feeder zones are not meant to exclude unfairly. They are meant to manage limited capacity. Um, and in terms of legal requirements, I would think that there are five key things parents should take note of. The first is that a public school must admit learners without unfair discrimination. You cannot refuse a learner admission based on race, nationality, language, religion, or disability. Second, Bella Act says that even where required documents have not been submitted, a learner must still be allowed to attend school while a parent is asked to obtain those documents. Third would be, that the draft regulations require proof of residential or work address for admission purposes. And there are some examples of what it gives of what are acceptable documents. So they do allow schools to verify information submitted. Fourth, no child may be excluded from a school program because a parent cannot pay school fees or does not subscribe to the school's mission statement or reasonable cultural, religious, or medical reasons. And fifth, parents have rights. If a learner is refused admission, a parent may appeal to the MEC, and the MEC must make a decision on whether or not a child is allowed to enter that school. The right to basic education is not something that is just limited to South African learners only. Our constitution says that every child in South Africa has a right to compulsory basic education.
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up. Two very important questions that we do have to cover is um, what do you believe needs to be done to make school admissions fairer and reduce the pressure on high demand schools? And my closing question would be for parents who feel trapped in failing schools, um, but can't access better ones, what realistic options are available to ensure their children still receive quality education?
Um, so, in terms of practical reforms that government and authorities could introduce, and again, these are just my opinions. I think, firstly, government must improve the quality of schools in poorer and overcrowded communities. If local schools become safer, better resourced, more disciplined, and offer stronger teaching, fewer parents would feel pushed to chase a small number of high demand schools. Second, there must be better planning for school capacity, especially in areas with rapid growth. Government needs to prioritize building of more schools, expanding existing schools instead of waiting for a crisis. Um, and third, I would say the admission process must be clearer and more transparent. Parents need to know exactly how placement works, what documents are needed, how feeder zones are applied, and how to appeal if they believe there's an unfair decision made. I also think, that there must be fair and proper verification. Schools should be able to check addresses and supporting documents, but that process must be consistent, not just randomly done. And lastly, I think, there should be more language and curriculum access where communities need it. Sometimes parents are not just chasing a better school or an English medium school, they're chasing a school that better matches their child's needs. That means government must look honestly at what surrounding communities actually need. And for the parents who feel trapped in failing schools, in terms of options, the first option is to use the formal appeal process where they may feel an admission decision appears unfair or unreasonable. Don't rely on brokers or people promising payment placements for money. I think parents should look beyond school name and ask practical questions like, is there academic support after school? Are there weekend programs? Are there literacy and math catch-up programs? What can parents do to get involved to improve schools? Where feasibility is a problem, parents can explore independent schools, homeschooling, tutor support, or micro cottage schools. But those options, need careful consideration of cost. And lastly, parents should remember a child's success is not determined by a school label alone. A struggling school can still be supplemented by strong parental involvement, structured home support, tutoring, reading routines, community based interventions. And we do see lots of matric learners coming from poor performing schools who end up with distinctions, end up going to universities.
And that's where we leave it, Neeresh Badal. You, of course, are also the founder of nonprofit organization Let's Do It Together for Education. Thank you indeed for your input today. All the best and God bless.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to all the listeners. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
It is exactly 1:04, and next we're going to be joined by Maulana Dawood Sampson, Islamic scholar and educator in the Western Cape, and we're going to be talking about seeking Laylatul Qadr, the night which is better than 1,000 months.